Now it's another day, which means another story has broken about the civil service by GBNews US correspondent Stephen Edginton. GBNews can reveal that civil servants working for His Majesty's Revenue and Customs have been resisting moves against diversity initiatives from the elected government, with these supposedly impartial officials reportedly saying it was their role to fight fascism. Well, Steve has also revealed that civil servants held a reflection session upon the death of African-American man George Floyd in America. Well, joining us now to discuss this is GB News US correspondent Stephen Edginton. And Stephen, break it down for us. What have you found?
On the 22nd of May, civil servants in HMRC held a reflection session discussing the death of George Floyd. This was 4 years after his death. In this discussion, civil servants questioned the government's priorities on tackling so-called wokeness in the civil service. One question put to senior civil servants was, the government is currently attacking EDI, that's equality, diversity and inclusivity. How are we going to ensure that these policies are protected and well funded within HMRC? That question was approved by an HMRC HR officer who then put it to these senior leaders. They didn't actually reply to that question. I don't think that's very surprising. Other interesting things that happened in this call, one senior civil servant, said that she cried at every single meeting following George Floyd's death. Another civil servant said that they were a race lead for HMRC. They have all these positions within the civil service, race champions, race leads, and so on, where civil servants can volunteer to push their race activism at work. And in this role, they said they invited their cousin, who's a professor of decolonization and race, to a lecture with HMRC civil servants. So I think a lot of civil servants here breaking the civil service code. They're not being impartial whatsoever. And when I put this to HMRC, they vehemently denied that any of that was true. And they claimed that my representation of events, despite the fact I was quoting exactly what civil servants said, was not right.
Pretty extraordinary that the impetus for this was a 4-year anniversary after an African-American man died in America. It is the British Treasury we're talking about, isn't it?
Absolutely. It is extraordinary. One of the comments that one of the civil servants, and by the way, these were all pretty senior civil servants within HMRC, one of the comments was that they had been accused of being racist against white people and of importing American problems to Britain. And they said that one of the positive things that's happened recently is that those comments have now essentially dried up. Now, I think that these people in this reflection session perhaps want to reflect a little bit on those criticisms of themselves. One of the people was talking about being the race lead for Wales, the Welsh region of HMRC in that department. And they said that they'd invited all sorts of people to discuss famous ethnic minority important figures from Welsh history. Now, I can't think of too many of them. So it does seem, again, that they believe they're in this American society, which has had African-American people for hundreds of years. Britain isn't like that. We're not America. And I think these civil servants have totally imported these American ideas on race.
You're quite right to say we're not America, but we do have our own challenges with racism in Britain, although very, very different to how the United States has these challenges. I wonder, is this all imported, or is this actually perhaps a direct consequence of a piece of legislation that was passed in the dying days of the last Labour government, the Equality Act? And after all, the government does have to follow acts of Parliament, given royal assent, statute in the UK. And doesn't the Equality Act, as it was passed in 2009, actually require a lot of this stuff?
It doesn't specifically compel civil servants to discuss George Floyd's death in meetings. It doesn't compel civil servants to break political impartiality by supporting Black Lives Matter and other political causes. It doesn't compel them to do any of the things that I've talked about that's happened in this call just a few weeks ago. What it does say is that government departments have a duty to foster relations between different groups, essentially between people with different genders or sexes or races or whatever. That can be interpreted in many, many ways. And it certainly is used as a justification by many of these civil servant activists who want to push their own political ideologies within work time and within working hours. So I think you're totally right to, in one part, blame the Equality Act for this stuff. But at the same time, the Equality Act does not specifically state that they should do any of these things. And this is merely an interpretation by activist civil servants.
Well, Stephen Edginton, thank you very much for bringing us yet another exclusive, peering into what is going on within the civil service of this country. Appreciate it.